I'm here on beautiful Ashkelon beach in Israel. I wanted to make a quick video as to how the banking system worldwide, the Fiat banking system, impoverishes people in two directions. When they earn the money, currency, and when they spend it. First, I'm going to take the direction of spending the money. A large expense for most people is housing. That expense for most people comes in the form of a mortgage. It has to be paid monthly. That mortgage, large part of it, well, some little guess, that mortgage, a large part of it is interest. Interest that has to be paid back to the bank. Now, most people believe that when they borrow money at a bank, the bank actually has the money on deposit. That is not the case. Through the fractional reserve lending system, banks can lend out several times what they have on deposit. For example, if a bank has $100 on deposit, special privileges granted to it by the state give it the right to lend out $1,000, thereby creating $900 out of thin air. This is shocking to most people. Now, that $900 that the banks create out of thin air, you, the consumer, the mortgage holder, have to work for. They created it out of thin air. You have to work for it. Thereby, a large sum of people's monthly expense is made up of a mortgage. A large part of that mortgage is simply paying back a loan to a bank, and that loan, most of it, was created out of thin air. Now, if you don't believe that this contributes to the high price of housing, you would be wrong. Were it not for banks, housing would actually be much, much cheaper, as it was back in the 1950s, before most people had mortgages. So this is how the banking system takes a large part of the money away from people as it is spent. Now we're going to see how it takes a large part of the money as it's earned. In the same way that individuals borrow money, nations also borrow money from these private banks, and once again, the money is created out of thin air by these private banks. These nations get in debt to these private banks and have interest on top of it, slapped onto this money created out of thin air. In most Western nations, this has resulted in the majority of taxes being collected, being spent on paying off national debts. Debts incurred to private banks who created the money, once again, out of thin air. This is completely unnecessary, as most states could generate their own currency, and used to, for the most part. But once again, state being what it is, a highly corruptible entity, it's folded to the interest of these private bankers. So now we can see how most of the money paid in taxes, and taxes are a large part, take out a large part of most people's income. So most of that money goes to these private banks. And again, once you actually have what's left, the net income in your pocket, a large chunk of it goes for housing. And again, so in essence, you're taxed by the banks as you earn the money, and you're taxed again by the banks as you spend it. So from both ends, most people are heavily taxed by banks indirectly via the power of the state. And that's how the game works.